Before we begin, I want to be clear. This film is not intended to be graphic or to show gore. Not because it doesn't exist, quite the opposite in fact. No, because violence does not need to be glorified on screen to be real. The concepts of justice, peace and rights are powerful enough on their own and should be recognized as such. Oppression is wrong whether it shocks your senses or not. Morality shouldn't need emotions to invoke them. What you are about to see will still challenge you. It may unsettle you, because it asks you to confront the atrocities which we've normalized. This is not about comfort, it is about truth, and the choice is yours to continue or to change.
Every generation faces a choice to uphold oppression or to end it. We say that we oppose injustice and we claim to stand for peace. Yet in our ordinary lives, we fund systems that are built on violence. And this is not an accident, and it is not a necessity, but it is a choice. Oppression is a choice. Injustice is a choice. And every one of us must answer, why do we insist on choosing it? Ask yourself, when you hear the word veganism, what comes to mind? Food? Products? A lifestyle trend? If so, you have already been misled. For veganism was never about consumption. Veganism is the refusal to exploit. The refusal to take from another sentient life what was never ours to take. That refusal, clear, consistent and uncompromising, is the very foundation of the vegan movement. And it did not begin in cookbooks or supermarkets. It began in the middle of World War II. Whilst the world burned, while millions were starved, enslaved and slaughtered, a handful of people saw the same logic of domination at work in the slaughterhouses and dairies of their own communities. They recognised that the violence that devoured Europe was the same violence that we normalise when we use non-human animals as property. They did not wait for peace to be delivered. They chose to create peace by refusing oppression. Veganism was never just about giving up meat or dairy. It was proposed as a solution to humanity's moral trough, a philosophy of justice, a declaration that exploitation itself is the problem. And the greatest strength of veganism has always been its consistency. Other justice movements are vital. Feminism fights for women's rights. Anti-racist movements fight for the equality of people of colour. Workers' movements fight against the exploitation in factory and field. But each of these stopped at the edge of their own scope. None extended their demands for justice to non-human animals. Veganism is different. Its focus is of course the liberation of non-humans, but its scope reaches far wider. It refuses sexism. It refuses racism. It refuses colonialism, the exploitation of children, the starvation of millions in a world full of abundance, and the wars that consume lives for profit and power. No other social justice movement makes this promise. No other framework holds the power to liberate all. That is what makes veganism unique, and that is what makes veganism the imperative. But we must remember this. People don't have to care about every single word that the pioneers spoke of, but we cannot afford to forget what they did, what they stood for, and what they stood against. In 1944, in the middle of chaos, they chose peace. They chose justice. And they built a philosophy of liberation for all sentient life. If we forget this, then we reduce veganism to diet tips and product swaps, and the most vital part of this movement will be lost. It does not take forever to research the history of the movement that you joined, but once you do, your perspective will change forever. You will see veganism for what it always was, not a consumer choice, but a refusal to participate in oppression wherever it is found. At the heart of every injustice is the same pattern, turning someone into something, reducing a life to property, and reducing a being to a resource. With non-humans, we disguise this by talking only about treatment, humane farming, ethical slaughter, better welfare. But the problem is not how we treat them. The problem is that we use them at all. Think about it. If I was to raise the issue of dog fighting, would I need to show you footage of dogs tearing one another apart for you to recognise it as wrong? If I spoke to you about trophy hunting, do I need you to watch a giraffe taken out with a rifle to recognise that this is just violence and exploitation dressed up as sport? If I was to talk about animal circuses, do I need to show you elephants whipped in order to perform tricks before you admit that this is oppression? If I was to mention child labour, do I need to parade images of exhausted children in sweatshops before you admit that it's unjust? If I describe human trafficking, do you require video evidence of people in chains to recognise it as oppression? Of course not, because we already know these things are wrong. We do not excuse them by saying, well, if it was done more gently, what if they suffered less? And yet, with many examples of non-human animals, this is exactly the lie that we tell ourselves, that if we soften the edges of domination, the domination itself becomes acceptable. But justice is not comfort within oppression. Justice means ending oppression. For centuries, humanity has fallen for this same deception. We told ourselves slavery was natural, that women were protected by being denied their rights, that colonized peoples were civilized by being stripped of their land and culture. We told ourselves public executions were entertainment, that children sent down mines and into factories was all part of progress, that tormenting animals in bear-baiting pits or dissecting them alive on stage was an educational spectacle, that hunting thousands of other species into extinction was justified. These were all once normalised. Today, we recognise them as abhorrent. And yet, in the same way, people now defend the use of animals as property by calling it humane, by framing it as necessary, or by insisting it simply is the way that things are done. But these are precisely the same excuses that have always been used to defend the indefensible. Veganism refuses those excuses. It looks above politics. It looks above tradition. It looks above culture. It looks at what is just. It is not about suffering alone. It is not about cruelty alone. It is about the wrong of use itself. Because exploitation is always oppression, even when hidden behind kind words, even when softened with comforts, even when normalised by culture. And this is precisely why intersectionality matters so much. Because the logic of domination is never confined to just one group. The mindset that excuses animal exploitation is the same mindset that excuses all prejudice, whether that's racism, ableism, sexism. To challenge oppression fully, we must challenge it consistently. And veganism does exactly that. It refuses oppression in all of its forms. It calls exploitation just what it is, and then demands that we stop choosing it. To understand the depth of this injustice, we have to confront its scale. Every year, tens of billions of land animals are killed for food. Chickens, pigs, cows, sheep, turkeys and ducks, the main victims. And beyond land, the numbers spiral even further. Fish and other aquatic animals, so vast that they are not even counted as individuals, but instead are measured by the ton. The true figure is in the trillions. Trillions of lives taken every single year. To put that into perspective, in just one single day, more animals are killed than the number of humans that have ever walked on this earth. And as we kill at that pace, the world outside shrinks. Today, only 4% of the biomass of mammals on this planet are free living and in the wild. The other 96% are either human beings or the animals that we breed, confine and kill. This violence is not rare. It is not an exception. It is the largest, most normalised system of exploitation in human history. And yet most of us never see it. The slaughterhouses are hidden from view. The factory farms are sealed warehouses, locked behind biosecurity warnings. The fishing fleets are all out at sea, where nobody's watching. By design, this violence is indivisible. Instead, we are only shown the end products, the neat cuts, the packaging, the brands. The animal becomes a product. The life becomes a commodity. The someone becomes a something. And we reinforce the illusion with our language. Bacon, beef, pork, words that erase the pig or the cow, words that turn a life into an object. The same trick is used everywhere. Leather, wool, down. Not the skin torn from someone else's back, not the fleece sheared until the flesh is cut. Just products on a shelf. Livestock, specimen, pest, pet. Labels that decide who is confined, who is experimented on, who is killed, and who is allowed to live by our side, so long as they behave. Language is the mask that makes oppression indivisible. A vocabulary designed to hide the someone inside the something. And this is not a few bad actors. It's not what other countries do. This is not about abuse on isolated farms. There are rights violations on all of them. This is not about how we treat anyone. It is about the fact that they are used at all. This is a system of oppression, domination, and violence, industrial, global, and universal. The machinery of oppression is efficient, automated, and relentless. Chickens are shackled upside down on conveyor belts. Pigs are gassed by the thousands in chambers no different than those from the war. Calves torn from mothers to keep that milk flowing. Fish suffocate in piles, gasping for oxygen. Elephants are beaten into submission to perform. Dolphins are confined to concrete pools. Foxes and minks caged and skinned for fashion. Monkeys restrained in laboratories, injected, discarded. This is what it means when life is property. And this scale is not shrinking. With every passing year, more animals are bred, confined, and killed than at any point in human history. We live in the age of the greatest violence against animals the world has ever seen. An atrocity hidden in plain sight, normalized so deeply that we do not even question it. And that is why the principle matters. Because without recognizing that use itself is the wrong, this scale will never end. It will only grow. Every system of oppression carries the same pattern. Divide, dominate, exploit. We see it in the history of racism, where entire peoples were treated as property based on colour of skin. We see it in the patriarchy, where women are denied autonomy over their own bodies at the expense of men. And we see it in the way we treat non-human animals. They are resources, tools, units of production. These injustices are not separate. They are variations on a theme. Imagine two futures. In the first one, all non-human animals are now free. There are no farms, no slaughterhouses, no zoos, no labs. Victory. But in that same world, we still tolerate sweatshops. War still rages. People still starve whilst food is wasted. Oppression has not ended. The mentality of domination still stands. Now imagine, if you will, a second future, a truly vegan world, where no sentient being is property, where no life is reduced to a tool or a resource, where oppression, whether human or non-human, finds no justification. That is not a dream of diet. That is the vision of liberation. And here is the truth. This is not a competition. Injustice does not queue politely, waiting for us to solve one issue at a time. It strikes everywhere at once. To oppose some oppressions is to leave others intact. Consistency is not a diversion. It is the foundation of credibility. It shows our stance is not arbitrary, not selective, not biased, but rooted in one unshakable principle, that exploitation and oppression are wrong, whomever the victim. This is why veganism can never be reduced to just a diet, a lifestyle, or a consumer trend. Those who stood at its beginning did not call for better treatment. They called for an end. They called for peace during war. If we forget that, veganism collapses into fragments. But if we remember it, veganism remains what it is always meant to be, a movement for liberation without exception. Every system of oppression defends itself with excuses. Always the same pattern. It is necessary. It is natural. It is tradition. We treat them well. God put them here for us. We are smarter than they are. We have heard these words before. They once justified slavery. They once justified the patriarchy. And now they are used to justify non-human animal exploitation. It is necessary. Necessary for whom? Not for your survival, not for your health. And even if it were a necessity, that's not a moral blank check. Human history is full of necessities we later recognised as wrong. It is natural. Nature is no moral compass. Violence, rape, domination, these are all natural too. To be human is to rise above instinct, to choose responsibility over convenience. It is tradition. Every injustice was once tradition. Segregation was tradition. Public executions were tradition. Tradition is not a defence. It is an admission that we cannot justify the act itself. We treat them well. But even if the treatment were gentle, the use is the violation. Enslavement is not justified by comfort. Slaughter is not redeemed by calmness. God put them here for us. Yet no religion mandates exploitation. You can be a perfectly good Christian, Muslim, Hindu, Jew, Buddhist, and still vegan. They are fully compatible. And if any deity declared it was acceptable to oppress unjustly, that would be just as much of a threat to you as it would to those you are licensed to harm. We are smarter than they are, but intelligence is always relative. We can use laptops, but we can't fly. We can drive cars, but we cannot run at 60 miles an hour, or breathe underwater, or use echolocation. If being smarter means anything at all, it means recognising moral responsibility. If we claim to be moral agents, then our duty is to protect moral patience. If we dominate them instead, we are not exercising our intelligence at all. We are literally abandoning it. Excuses always shift. The words change with time and with culture, but beneath them all, the structure is just the same. It's a justification for domination. If we strip away the excuses, then what remains is the simple fact of use. The problem is not cruelty. The problem is not treatment. The problem is use. And that is the precedent that must guide us. If it is wrong to exploit humans, even when it's necessary, even when it's traditional, even when it's ordained, or even when they are weaker than us, then it is always wrong to exploit non-humans for the same reasons. Once we frame it this way, the argument collapses every time, because the question is not how we use them. The question is why we claim the right to use them at all. You may not have built this system, but every day you choose whether it continues. Each purchase, each meal, each ticket, each silence. They are all choices. And choice is what makes you responsible. You already know what's happening, and you already know it's wrong. The question now is not whether you know. The question is whether you will act. Because if you choose differently, if you refuse to take part, you don't just withdraw from violence, you help build its alternative. There is a way out, but let's be clear, the path we are on leads to ruin. Everything is broken. Everything is rotten. Our food system, our politics, our environment, our ethics, corrupted by the same logic of domination. Species extinction, climate collapse, pandemics born from cages and slaughterhouse, children in sweatshops, families starving whilst grain is fed to other animals, wars over land, over water, over control. This is not just about them, it is about all of us. The choice is stark: change or extinction, justice or annihilation, liberation or collapse. And here is the truth that cannot be erased. You hold that power, not governments, not corporations, you. Every act of refusal, every moment of courage, every stand against exploitation cracks that system that told you it would never change. Veganism is not passive. It is not a consumer trend. It is resistance. It is solidarity. It is the recognition that liberation is one struggle shared by everybody. For the calf who keeps her mother, for the bird who never knows the cage, for the child who eats because food was not fed to someone else, for the forests that still stand, for the generations that will come after you and I. This is not a sacrifice, it is a reclamation of justice, of peace, and of integrity. Understand this. Every movement for justice has faced the same objections. They said it wasn't possible. They said it was extreme. They said that it asked for too much. And yet those who refused to wait, those who refused to compromise, and those who stood in the face of violence and said no more, they are the reason we know justice at all. And now it is our turn. The way out is not easy, but the way out is clear. It is veganism. It is education. It is action. It is solidarity. The time for waiting is over. The time for half measures is over. This is the line in history. This is the choice before you. The way out is here. The way out is now. And what happens next? That's up to you. This began with a handful of people in 1944 in the shadow of chaos, surrounded by violence, oppression, and despair. And yet they stood and they said, no more. 81 years have passed since then, and the world has only grown more oppressive, more violent, and more fractured. But that principle has not changed. Exploitation is still exploitation. Oppression is still oppression. And justice is still justice. You live in a time of great privilege. You have choices they could only have dreamed of. And with those choices come responsibility. This change is well within our grasp. To make real the vision that they began. To say once again, and this time without compromise, no more.
History remembers those who refused, the ones who said no, even when the world demanded yes. Veganism is not loss. It is a step out of violence. It is the recovery of respect, the return to integrity, civilization for the very first time. And it is within everyone's reach. You do not need permission. You do not need to wait. You only need to begin. Every act of refusal is liberation. Every choice for justice is a step into peace. Liberation without exception is not a dream for the future. It is alive already, in the moment you decide to live by it. And once you see that, there is no turning back.